It was a cold and quiet evening in a small town on the edge of the countryside. The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the smell of wet soil after a light rain. The sky was dark, filled with heavy clouds that looked like they could fall at any moment. Inside a small brick house, a woman named Sarah sat near the window, waiting for her son, Michael, to come home. She had been waiting for hours, her eyes fixed on the road outside, her heart growing heavier with every minute that passed. Michael had gone out earlier that evening to meet his wife, Emily, after a small argument they had at home the night before. Sarah didn't know what the argument was about, but she could sense that something was wrong between them. The clock ticked slowly, and each sound made Sarah more restless. She kept glancing at her phone, hoping to see Michael's name appear on the screen, but there was nothing. The house felt too silent, too empty. Even the ticking clock seemed louder than usual. She tried calling his number again, but it went straight to voicemail. A strange feeling started to grow in her chest, a feeling she couldn't explain. It wasn't just worry, it was fear. A mother's fear. The kind that tells you something terrible has happened before you even know what it is. She whispered to herself, "I still remember that night," because she knew that night would change her life forever. Sarah decided to step outside for some air. The sky was darker now, and the air was cold enough to sting her cheeks. The road outside her home was almost empty, except for the sound of crickets and the faraway hum of a car engine. She looked down the road, hoping to see her son's car lights, but there was nothing. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, and that small sound made her heart skip. Something didn't feel right. Half an hour later, her phone finally rang. Sarah's hands shook as she grabbed it. The number was unknown. She answered quickly, her voice trembling. "Hello? Who is this?" A deep male voice spoke from the other end. "Ma'am, are you the mother of Michael Turner?" Sarah froze. Her heart began to race. Yes, I am." "Who are you? What happened?" The man's tone softened, but it carried a weight that made Sarah's knees weak. "Ma'am, your son's been found near the old Miller Road, in a ditch. He's alive, but barely. We're taking him to County Hospital now." Sarah's breath caught. "What? A ditch? What happened to him?" But the man didn't answer clearly. "Please get to the hospital as soon as you can, ma'am. He needs you." The line went dead. Sarah stood there for a second, staring at her phone, unable to move. The world around her felt like it had stopped. Then she ran inside, grabbed her coat and keys, and drove off into the night. The road to Miller Road was dark and narrow, lined with tall trees that swayed in the cold wind. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her mind spinning with questions. What was Michael doing there? Who could have done this? And why? When she reached the hospital, the lights were blinding compared to the dark outside. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, and people moved quickly through the corridors. Sarah ran to the reception desk, her voice trembling. "My name is Sarah Turner. My son, Michael, he was brought here. Please, where is he?" The nurse looked up from her computer, recognizing the panic in her eyes. "Room 214, ma'am. He's in critical condition. The doctors are with him." Sarah didn't wait. She ran down the hallway, her footsteps echoing off the cold tile floor. When she reached the room, she saw doctors and nurses working quickly around her son. His face was pale, his body bruised and scratched. There was a cut on his forehead, and his clothes were covered in dirt and blood. Sarah's heart broke at the sight of him. Her boy, her only child, lying there like that. One of the doctors noticed her and gently guided her back. "Ma'am, please wait outside. We're doing everything we can." Sarah stood frozen at the door, tears streaming down her face. She could barely breathe. She pressed her hands together and whispered a prayer. "Please, God, please save him. Don't take my son." Minutes felt like hours as she waited in the hallway. The sound of machines beeping and nurses moving around made her chest tighten. Then, suddenly, the door opened and a nurse called her in. "He's asking for you, ma'am." "Just for a moment." Sarah rushed in, her heart pounding. Michael's eyes were half open, his lips trembling. He looked weak, but there was something desperate in his gaze. Sarah took his hand gently, tears falling on his skin. "I'm here, baby. Mom's here. Don't try to speak, okay? Just rest." But Michael shook his head slowly. His voice was faint, barely a whisper. "Mom, it was my wife." Sarah's breath stopped. She looked at him, confused and terrified. "What? What do you mean? Michael, what happened?" But he didn't answer. His eyes slowly closed again as the heart monitor beeped faster. Nurses rushed in, pushing Sarah aside. She stood there in shock, her mind spinning. His wife? What did he mean? The doctor came out a few minutes later. "He's stable for now, but we'll need to keep him under observation. He's lost a lot of blood. He's lucky to be alive." Sarah nodded, though she barely heard him. Her mind was stuck on the words her son had said. "It was my wife." Those 4 words kept repeating in her head like an echo that wouldn't stop. As she sat in the hospital hallway, she tried to understand. Michael and Emily had been married for only 2 years. They seemed happy. Yes, they argued sometimes, but every couple did. Emily was a kind woman, or at least Sarah thought she was. She had always been polite, always smiling. She couldn't imagine her being part of something like this. But then Sarah remembered something strange. Earlier that week, Michael had come home late, looking tense. He had bruises on his arm, and when she asked, he brushed it off, saying he fell at work. Sarah didn't believe him, but she didn't push. Now she wished she had. Hours passed, and Sarah sat beside her son's bed, watching the machines and listening to the steady beeping. The night outside grew darker, the rain starting again, tapping softly against the hospital windows. The world outside felt far away, like a different reality. Inside this small room, time had stopped. Then the door opened quietly, and Emily walked in. Her eyes were red, her face pale. She looked shocked, even scared. "Oh my God, Sarah. I came as soon as I heard. What happened to him?" Sarah looked at her, her expression hard to read. "You tell me, Emily. What happened to my son?" Emily froze, her hands shaking. I don't know. The police called me. They said they found him near the old road. I don't understand how, he just left after our argument. I thought he went to his friend's place." Sarah studied her face, trying to see through her words. Something about her tone didn't feel right. It was too controlled, too practiced. Before Sarah could ask more, a police officer entered the room. "Mrs. Turner?" he asked, looking at Emily first, then Sarah. "We need to ask a few questions about what happened tonight." Sarah's heart tightened. She wanted answers, but she was also scared of what she might hear. The officer explained that a driver passing by had spotted a body near the ditch on Miller Road. When he stopped to check, he found Michael barely conscious, covered in mud and bruises. There were no skid marks, no sign of a car crash. It didn't look like an accident. Someone had hurt him and left him there to die. Sarah felt her stomach twist. "Who would do something like that?" she whispered. The officer sighed. "We're not sure yet. But from what we've seen, this wasn't random." Sarah looked at Emily again. Her daughter-in-law was standing quietly by the wall, her eyes lowered. She didn't say much. The officer continued, "We'll need to talk to both of you tomorrow. For now, he needs rest." After he left, the room was silent. Sarah sat beside her son, holding his hand. Emily stayed standing, staring at the floor. The air between them was heavy, full of things neither of them wanted to say out loud. When the nurse came in later to check Michael's vitals, Sarah stepped outside to get some water. As she passed the hallway, she overheard Emily on the phone near the corner. Her voice was low but sharp. "No, he's still alive. Yes, I know. We'll have to fix this before he talks." Sarah froze. Her body went cold. Emily quickly ended the call and turned, her face changing when she saw Sarah standing there. "Oh. I was just calling my sister," she said quickly. "She's worried too." Sarah didn't respond. She just looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment, something inside her changed. The confusion faded, replaced by a slow, burning fear. That night, as the rain fell harder outside, Sarah sat back in the hospital chair, holding her son's hand again. The beeping of the monitor was the only sound in the room. She looked at Michael's face and whispered softly, "I promise, my son. I'll find out what she did to you." But deep down, Sarah knew the nightmare had only just begun. The morning sun barely touched the hospital windows. The air inside was cold and heavy, filled with the smell of disinfectant and the faint beeping of machines. Sarah had barely slept through the night. She sat on the same chair beside Michael's bed, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands holding his tightly. He still hadn't woken up again since last night. Every now and then, he moved slightly or murmured something she couldn't understand. Sarah stared at him, her mind filled with fear and questions. Those words, "It was my wife," kept echoing in her head again and again. She couldn't ignore them. They were the last words her son managed to say before slipping into unconsciousness. The way he said them, weak, broken, but full of pain, made her heart ache even more. As the nurse came in to check Michael's vitals, Sarah stepped outside for some air. The hospital hallway was quiet except for the occasional squeak of a cartwheel. She walked toward the small cafeteria, her mind spinning. She poured herself some coffee, but her hands were shaking too much to drink it. All she could think about was Emily, her daughter-in-law. She remembered hearing Emily's strange phone call the night before. The words "we'll have to fix this before he talks" kept haunting her. Sarah wasn't sure what Emily meant, but it didn't sound innocent. Not at all. When she returned to Michael's room, she stopped at the door. Emily was already inside, sitting close to his bed. She was holding his hand and whispering something. Sarah stood silently and listened. Emily's voice was low but tense. "You have to wake up, Michael. Please. You can't say anything. Not yet. You don't understand." Sarah froze. Her heart started beating faster. She took a step closer, and Emily quickly looked up, startled. Her face turned pale for a second, then she smiled weakly. "Oh, Sarah. I didn't see you there. I was just talking to him. Trying to comfort him." Sarah forced a small nod, pretending she hadn't heard anything. "That's kind of you," she said softly, though her voice trembled. Emily stood up and smoothed her hair. "I'm going home for a bit. I need to rest. I'll come back later." Sarah watched as Emily left the room, her heels clicking down the hallway. When the door closed, Sarah slowly sat beside her son again. She looked at his pale face and whispered, "What did she do to you, Michael? What are you trying to tell me?" Later that morning, a police officer arrived to take Sarah's statement. His name was Detective Harris. He was tall, calm, and had a serious expression that made Sarah nervous. He asked her about Michael, what time he left, if he had any enemies, if anything unusual had happened lately. Sarah told him about the argument Michael had with Emily, and about the strange phone call she overheard. Detective Harris listened carefully, taking notes. "Did you hear who she was talking to on the phone?" he asked. Sarah shook her head. "No, but she said something like, "We'll have to fix this before he talks." I don't know what she meant, but it didn't sound right. The detective frowned slightly. That's concerning. We'll look into her phone records and recent calls. For now, don't confront her directly. Let us handle it. Sarah nodded, though part of her wanted to confront Emily right then. She wanted to grab her by the shoulders and demand to know what she had done. But she stayed quiet. That evening, when the hospital grew quiet again, Michael's condition suddenly changed. His heartbeat became faster, and he started mumbling in his sleep. Sarah leaned closer, trying to hear. Don't leave me there, please. I trusted you," he whispered. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She touched his hand. "Who, Michael? Who left you?" But he didn't answer. His breathing slowed again, and he slipped back into silence. Sarah sat there for a long time, staring at him. Then she made a decision. She couldn't just sit and wait anymore. She needed answers. She needed to know what really happened on that road. The next morning, she drove to the place where they had found Michael, the ditch on Miller Road. The police had already cleared the area, but there were still faint signs of what had happened. The ground was wet, muddy, and covered in tire marks. Sarah stood there, her coat pulled tightly around her as the wind blew through the trees. She looked around, trying to imagine what her son had gone through that night. She could almost see it, his car stopping, maybe someone standing in the dark, calling his name. Then something happening, something violent. She felt sick thinking about it. Then she noticed something, a small silver object half buried in the mud near the ditch. She knelt down and picked it up carefully. It was a locket, delicate, with a small heart-shaped design. She opened it and gasped. Inside was a tiny photo of Emily and Michael, from their wedding day. Sarah's hands shook as she stared at it. What was Emily's locket doing here, in the dirt where her son was found? She drove straight to the police station and met Detective Harris again. She showed him the locket. He looked at it closely, then nodded. "This definitely belongs to Emily?" "Yes," Sarah said. "I remember her wearing it. She said Michael gave it to her as a gift." The detective wrote something in his notebook. This could mean she was here that night. Sarah swallowed hard. Then she lied. "She told me she was home." Detective Harris looked serious. "We'll question her again. But we have to be careful. If she's hiding something, we don't want her to know we're on to her." Sarah nodded, but her heart was full of rage and fear. She couldn't believe it. How could Emily, the woman her son loved, be involved in something like this? That night, Sarah went back to the hospital. Emily was already there again, sitting beside Michael. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying. "The police called me today," Emily said softly. "They asked strange questions. Do they think I did something?" Sarah's voice was cold. "They're just doing their job. Trying to find out what really happened." Emily looked away, avoiding her eyes. "I just want him to wake up. That's all." Sarah didn't reply. She sat down quietly and looked at her son. She could feel Emily's eyes on her, and the tension between them filled the room like a heavy fog. Around midnight, Sarah dozed off for a few minutes in the chair. When she woke up, she noticed Emily wasn't there anymore. Her coat was gone. The hallway was silent. Sarah frowned and got up to look around. As she walked past the nurse's station, she saw Emily near the end of the corridor, talking to someone in a dark coat. She couldn't see the person's face clearly, but they were standing too close, whispering urgently. Sarah quickly stepped behind the corner, watching. Emily's voice was tense. "He's still alive. The doctors say he might wake up tomorrow." The man whispered something back, but Sarah couldn't hear. Emily's reply made her blood run cold. No, we can't wait. If he talks, everything's over. Sarah gasped quietly. She stumbled back, her heart pounding. She didn't want to believe what she'd just heard. Emily, her own daughter-in-law, wanted her son dead. The man in the coat glanced around, and Sarah quickly hid behind the wall. After a moment, they both left through the back exit. Sarah waited a few minutes, then hurried back to Michael's room, her hands shaking. She sat beside him again, tears falling silently. She didn't know what to do. Should she tell the police now? Should she confront Emily tomorrow? Or should she wait for proof? Just then, Michael's hand twitched. His eyelids fluttered slightly. Sarah leaned closer, holding her breath. His lips moved weakly. "Mom," he whispered, so softly she almost didn't hear it. "I'm here, sweetheart," she said quickly, squeezing his hand. "You're safe now. Don't try to talk." But he kept speaking, his voice faint. She pushed me, said I deserved it, said no one would believe me." Sarah felt her heart crack. "Who, Michael? Who did this to you?" His breathing grew heavier. "Emily," he said, barely audible. And then his hand went still. Sarah froze. The monitor started beeping faster. Nurses rushed in, calling for the doctor. They pushed Sarah back again, and she stood there, trembling, tears streaming down her face. The doctor worked quickly to stabilize him. After a few tense minutes, he turned to her. "He's okay for now. But he needs rest. His body's still weak." Sarah nodded numbly. She couldn't stop hearing that word, Emily. Her son had finally said it clearly. When she stepped out of the room again, she saw Detective Harris walking toward her. He must have just arrived. "Mrs. Turner," he said softly, "we found something else." Emily's car was seen near Miller Road that night. The traffic cameras caught it at 11:47 p.m. Sarah looked at him, her face pale. "Then it's true," she whispered. "She was there." The detective nodded. "We'll bring her in for questioning tomorrow morning." Sarah felt a mix of relief and terror. Relief that someone believed her now, but terror about what Emily might do before morning. As she walked back into Michael's room, she whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, everything will come out." But deep down, she knew the night was far from over. Because someone, maybe Emily, maybe the man in the coat, still had unfinished business. And they wouldn't stop until the truth was buried forever. The morning light crept slowly through the hospital curtains, casting a pale glow across the white walls. Sarah hadn't slept at all. She sat on the edge of her chair, her eyes red from exhaustion but her mind too alert to rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her son's face, broken, bruised, and whispering that one word that changed everything, Emily. Those few letters burned inside her chest like fire. Her son's wife. The woman who used to bring flowers every Sunday. The one who smiled sweetly at family dinners, who pretended to care. Now that same woman stood accused in Sarah's heart of something too dark to understand. Detective Harris had promised to bring Emily in for questioning that morning. Sarah didn't know how she would face her, but she knew she had to. She had to hear the truth. Just before dawn, Sarah stood beside her son's bed again. Michael was still unconscious, his body weak but holding on. She brushed his hair gently off his forehead. "I promise you, my son," she whispered, "I will not let her hurt you again." At 9 o'clock, the hospital doors opened, and Detective Harris arrived with 2 officers. Emily came with them, her face pale, her hair messy as if she hadn't slept either. But her eyes, those calm, clever eyes, still had something sharp behind them. She looked at Sarah but didn't speak. Harris motioned for her to follow him to a private room. Sarah stood outside, her hands clasped tightly, listening through the thin wall. Inside, Emily spoke in a low voice. "I already told you everything. Michael and I argued, yes, but I didn't hurt him. I was at home that night. The detective's tone was firm. Then how do you explain this? There was a pause. Sarah guessed he had shown her the locket. Emily hesitated. That's mine, but I lost it days ago. I didn't even know where it was. Detective Harris replied, we found it near the ditch where your husband was discovered. And your car was caught on camera driving that same road around the same time. Emily's voice cracked slightly. I was driving to clear my head. I didn't stop. I didn't see anything. Then why didn't you tell us that before? I was scared. Emily snapped. Everyone already thinks I did something. I didn't. I loved him. Sarah closed her eyes, listening. Something about the tone didn't sound like guilt, it sounded like performance. A mask, just like always. After half an hour, the detective came out. Mrs. Turner, he said quietly, we're releasing her for now. We don't have enough evidence yet. But we'll be watching her closely. Sarah's heart sank. You're letting her go? For now. Until we get more from your son when he wakes up. Emily walked out of the room, avoiding Sarah's eyes. She picked up her purse, her hands trembling slightly. Sarah, she said softly, I know you think I did something terrible. But I didn't. I swear on my life. Sarah didn't answer. She just stared at her, her expression cold and steady. My son's words were clear, Emily. I believe him. For a moment, Emily's face hardened, just a flicker, quick and sharp, before she turned and left the hospital. When she was gone, Detective Harris said quietly, we'll keep an officer nearby. Don't worry. She won't get far if she tries anything. Sarah nodded, but worry still filled her heart. She had seen something in Emily's eyes, a kind of quiet anger that didn't fade easily. That afternoon, as the hours dragged by, Sarah received a call from one of Michael's old friends, David, a man he'd known since college. His voice was nervous. Mrs. Turner, I just heard what happened. I'm so sorry. But I think I know something. Sarah's breath caught. What do you mean? David hesitated. A week before the accident, Michael called me. He said he found something strange about Emily. Something about money. He wanted my advice, but before we could meet, he stopped answering my calls. Sarah's chest tightened. Money? What kind of money? I'm not sure, David said. But he mentioned a man Emily used to know before they got married. Said he might be back in her life. He sounded scared. Sarah thanked him and hung up, her mind spinning. A man from Emily's past. Money. Lies. It was all starting to make sense. That night, when the hospital grew quiet again, Sarah couldn't sit still. She decided to go to Emily's house. She needed to see what Emily was hiding. The house stood at the end of a narrow lane, silent and dark. Sarah parked her car a little distance away and walked carefully through the wet grass. The lights inside were off, except for a faint glow coming from the study. Through the window, Sarah could see Emily pacing back and forth, talking on the phone. Yes, I have it, Emily said sharply. He didn't tell anyone else. But his mother is asking questions now. She's not backing off. There was a pause. Then Emily said, I can handle her. Just make sure the money's ready. Once he's gone, no one will know. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Once he's gone. The words made her knees weak. Suddenly, a noise behind her made her turn. A twig snapped. Someone was standing near the fence. But before she could see who it was, the person ran off into the darkness. Sarah's heart pounded as she rushed back to her car and drove away. Back at the hospital, she found Detective Harris waiting near the entrance. I went to her house, she confessed quickly. I heard her talking on the phone. She said something about money and about finishing it once Michael is gone. The detective's face turned serious. You shouldn't have gone there alone, but this helps. We'll get a warrant to check her phone and records. Sarah sat down, shaking. There's a man she's working with. I saw someone outside. I couldn't see his face. We'll find him, the detective said firmly. Hours later, when the night was deep and quiet again, Sarah went back to her son's room. The soft light from the monitor blinked rhythmically, the sound of his weak breathing filling the silence. She sat beside him and took his hand again. Suddenly, his fingers twitched. His lips moved slightly. Sarah leaned closer, her heart racing. "Mom," he whispered faintly, his voice dry. "I'm here, Michael." "You're safe," she said softly, tears filling her eyes. He tried to speak again. She wanted the insurance money. She said it was all her plan, with Daniel. Sarah's breath stopped. Daniel? Who's Daniel? But before he could answer, his voice faded again. His eyes closed, and the machine beeped steadily once more. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, trembling. Insurance money. Daniel. Everything clicked together in her mind like pieces of a dark puzzle. Emily and this man, Daniel, had planned to hurt Michael for money. The next morning, Sarah told Detective Harris everything. He nodded grimly. That matches what we found. Emily has been transferring large sums of money to a man named Daniel Moore. He has a record, fraud, blackmail, even assault. Sarah's stomach turned. Then they tried to kill my son for money. We're moving fast now, the detective said. We'll bring them both in. But we need one final confirmation, your son's testimony when he wakes up. Sarah looked at Michael through the glass of the ICU room. He'll tell you everything, she said firmly. He's stronger than she thinks. But that night, when Sarah stepped out to get a coffee, something terrible happened. The nurse at the front desk suddenly called out, "Mrs. Turner. Come quickly." Sarah ran back to the room. The door was open, and the bed was empty. The sheets were pulled back, and the machines were unplugged. Michael was gone. Sarah's heart stopped. What happened? She cried. The nurse stammered, I don't know. I just came to check, and he wasn't here. Detective Harris arrived moments later, his face tense. He checked the hallway cameras and cursed under his breath. The security feed shows someone in a nurse's uniform pushing his bed out. The face was covered. We think it was a woman. Sarah grabbed his arm. Emily. It has to be her. The detective looked grim. We're checking the parking lot cameras now. If it's her, she won't get far. Sarah's legs went weak. She could barely stand. Please, find my son, she whispered. Please, don't let her take him. Moments later, Harris's phone rang. He listened, then looked up sharply. They found an abandoned van 2 miles away. The driver fled on foot. Your son was inside, still alive. Sarah gasped, her tears falling freely. Thank God. But then Harris added quietly, Emily wasn't there. She's still missing. Sarah's relief froze into fear again. Emily was out there somewhere, desperate and dangerous. As she stood in the cold hospital corridor, clutching the wall for support, Sarah knew one thing with certainty: Emily wouldn't stop until the truth was buried, and she'd do anything to silence Michael forever. And somewhere in the shadows of that quiet town, Emily was already planning her next move. The wind was sharp that morning, carrying the scent of rain and metal. Police cars lined the small road near the old bridge where they had found the abandoned van. Flashing lights painted the trees in red and blue. Sarah stood beside Detective Harris, her coat pulled tight around her shoulders. Her eyes were fixed on the empty van, her heart pounding with fear and anger. Michael had been found inside, weak and barely conscious, still hooked to the 4-tube they had stolen him with. He was alive, but only just. The thought made Sarah's stomach twist. She could almost see it in her mind, Emily, wearing a nurse's uniform, pushing his bed down the corridor, pretending to care, pretending to help, while secretly planning to finish what she had started. Detective Harris's voice pulled her back to the moment. We found tire tracks from the van leading toward the riverbank. We think she switched vehicles. There are no signs of her here now. Sarah looked at the detective. She planned this. Every move. She didn't just run, she disappeared. Harris nodded grimly. Emily Turner has gone missing. But we'll find her. We always do. Sarah didn't answer. She just kept staring at the van, imagining her son inside, helpless, while the woman he loved betrayed him. A mother's heart doesn't easily forgive, and Sarah's had turned to stone overnight. Back at the hospital, Michael was moved to a private recovery room under police guard. He was still unconscious, but stable. Sarah sat beside him again, holding his hand and whispering softly, "You're safe now, my boy. She won't touch you again. I promise." The detectives' team worked fast. They tracked down the man Michael had mentioned, Daniel Moore. His name was in Emily's phone records and bank transfers. He had a criminal past, fraud, scams, and violence. The kind of man who could make someone disappear without leaving a trace. That evening, Harris came to see Sarah again. "We've got something," he said, handing her a small brown file. Inside were photographs, Emily and Daniel together, laughing, drinking at a bar. Another picture showed them standing close, their hands touching. Sarah's stomach turned. "So she lied about everything," she whispered. "She was still seeing him after she married my son." Harris nodded. "Looks like they planned this for months. Your son's life insurance policy was increased recently, signed by both of them. The payout would have gone directly to her." Sarah closed her eyes, fighting tears. He trusted her. He loved her. The detective's voice softened. "He'll need protection now. If she's still out there, she might try again." Sarah nodded, her eyes hardening. "Let her try. I'll be here." That night, the hospital was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Sarah sat by the window, staring out at the rain. She could almost feel Emily's presence somewhere out there in the dark, hiding, watching, waiting. She whispered to herself, "You can't hide forever, Emily." The next morning, Detective Harris called her again. "We found something at Emily's house," he said. "You should come." Sarah's hands trembled as she followed the detective into the small 2-story home where Emily and Michael once lived together. The living room looked normal at first, neat, quiet, cold. But as they moved deeper inside, the illusion faded. In the study, there were papers scattered everywhere, torn letters, burnt edges, and a half-empty glass of wine still on the table. On the wall behind the desk was a large corkboard with photos pinned to it, photos of Michael. At work, at home, even some from their wedding. Red strings connected the pictures like a spider's web. Sarah felt her heart drop. "What is this?" she whispered. Harris's face darkened. "It's a plan." She was watching him. Every move. Every place he went. She kept notes, times, dates, names. Sarah stepped closer. On one paper, written in sharp, angry handwriting, were the words, "He can't find out." Another note said, "Insurance papers signed, 2 weeks left." There was also a small envelope taped to the wall. Harris pulled it down and opened it. Inside was a photo, Emily and Daniel standing near a car, the same model that was seen near the ditch. On the back of the photo, written in black ink, were the words, "No loose ends." Sarah gasped softly. Her knees went weak, and she leaned against the wall for support. She planned to kill him, she said quietly. She really planned it. Harris nodded. We'll issue a warrant for both of them. The man, Daniel, hasn't been seen for days either. We think they're together, hiding somewhere. Sarah looked around the room again, at the smiling faces of Emily and Michael from happier days, at the lies hidden behind them, and felt a surge of fury. She took everything good in his life and turned it into a weapon. Later that evening, Sarah returned to the hospital. Michael had woken up again, weak, but aware. His eyes fluttered open slowly, and when he saw his mother, he tried to speak. "Mom," he whispered. Sarah rushed to him. "Don't try to talk too much. You're safe now." But he shook his head slightly. "You have to stop her, she'll come back." Sarah gripped his hand. "We know, sweetheart. The police are looking for her." Michael's voice trembled. "It wasn't just about money," she said. "I ruined everything, that Daniel was supposed to be with her, and I took him away." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean, you took him away?" Michael took a shallow breath. "Daniel used to work with her before we met. I didn't know about him until I found messages. She said if she couldn't have both, she'd have nothing. She said she'd rather see me dead than lose." Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. She couldn't believe the cruelty in those words. "Oh, Michael," she whispered, stroking his hair. "I'll make sure she never comes near you again." But deep down, she knew it wasn't over. People like Emily didn't just disappear, they waited for the right moment. That night, as Sarah sat in the chair beside him, she dozed off for a short while. She woke suddenly when she heard a faint noise, a creak outside the door. The guard who was supposed to be stationed there was gone. Sarah's heart started racing. She stood up quietly and stepped toward the door. The hallway was dimly lit, silent except for the distant hum of machines. Then she saw it, a shadow moving near the corner. A woman's shape. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She whispered, "Emily." The figure turned slightly, and Sarah saw her face. Pale, tired, but full of rage. Emily's eyes met hers for a brief, terrifying second before she ran. "Stop her!" Sarah screamed, rushing into the hall. 2 nurses came running as alarms began to ring. Detective Harris appeared moments later, gun drawn, but Emily was already gone, vanished down the emergency exit stairs. Harris ran after her, shouting into his radio. Sarah stood frozen, clutching her chest, her whole body trembling. "She was here," she whispered. "She came to finish it." A few minutes later, Harris returned, out of breath. "She's gone again. But she can't be far. We'll lock down the area." Sarah felt weak, tears streaming down her face. "She won't stop until he's dead," she said. "She's not human anymore. She's hate in flesh." Over the next few days, the police searched everywhere, hotels, nearby towns, even abandoned cabins near the river. But Emily was nowhere to be found. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, Michael slowly began to recover. He could sit up now, though his body still ached. He talked to his mother about small memories, their family dinners, old vacations, the day he met Emily for the first time. "She was so sweet then," he said softly. "I really thought she was the one." Sarah smiled sadly. "Evil never shows its face at the beginning, my son. It waits for the right moment." One evening, as Sarah was leaving the hospital to go home for the first time in days, she noticed something strange on her car windshield, a small folded piece of paper tucked under the wiper. She opened it, her hands trembling. It was a note, written in messy handwriting. "You can't protect him forever. Love, Emily." Sarah's blood ran cold. She looked around the parking lot, but there was no one. The shadows seemed thicker that night, the air colder. She rushed back inside, calling for Detective Harris. When he saw the note, his face turned grim. "She's close. Too close. We'll increase security immediately." Sarah clutched the paper in her shaking hand. The words felt like a knife to her heart. Emily wasn't running away anymore, she was circling back. Watching. Waiting. That night, Sarah sat by her son again, unable to sleep. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Every sound made her jump. She kept imagining Emily's face in the darkness, her whisper at the door. And just before dawn, as the first light of morning touched the sky, Sarah thought she heard something faint, a voice, soft and distant, from the hallway. It was Emily's voice. "I told you I'd come back." Sarah stood up slowly, her heart pounding so loud she could barely breathe. When she turned toward the door, the handle began to move. The hospital was silent except for the soft hum of machines and the distant echo of footsteps in the corridor. The early morning light was faint, painting everything in shades of gray. Sarah stood frozen near the door, staring at the handle that had just moved. Her breath caught in her throat, her pulse racing like thunder in her ears. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Then, the handle turned slowly again, and the door creaked open just a few inches. "Who's there?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. No answer. Only the faint sound of someone breathing, soft, careful, close. Sarah took a step back toward her son's bed. "Michael," she whispered urgently, "stay quiet." But he was still half asleep, weak and unaware of what was happening. The door opened wider. A shadow slipped through, tall, thin, wearing a dark coat. Sarah's heart stopped when she saw the pale face in the dim light. It was Emily. Her eyes looked different now, empty, wild, desperate. "Emily!" Sarah gasped. "Don't come near him." Emily stood there, silent, her hair messy, her lips trembling. "I just wanted to see him," she said in a low, broken voice. "I needed to explain." "Explain?" Sarah cried softly. "You left him to die in a ditch. You tried to kill your own husband." Emily shook her head slowly. "You don't understand, Sarah. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Daniel changed everything." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Daniel? He's the one who helped you." Emily's expression darkened. "No. He used me. He said he loved me, but it was all about the money. When Michael found out about the insurance, I wanted to stop. I didn't want to hurt him. But Daniel said if I didn't do it, he would kill me too." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "You expect me to believe that?" Emily took a step forward, her eyes filling with tears. "I never wanted Michael to die. I swear it. I tried to get him out of that ditch before the police came, but Daniel saw me. He said it was too late." Sarah's mind was spinning. Could she be telling the truth? Could Emily really have been forced into this? She didn't know, but she wasn't about to take chances. "Stay right there," Sarah warned. "The police are already looking for you. If you move one step closer, I'll scream this whole hospital down." Emily froze. She looked fragile and broken, her body trembling. "Please," she whispered, "I just need to see his face one last time." Sarah shook her head firmly. "No. You've done enough damage." Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the hallway, fast, heavy, urgent. Detective Harris burst through the door, his gun raised. "Emily Turner!" "Don't move," he shouted. Emily gasped, backing toward the window. "No, no, I can't go to jail," she cried. "He'll find me. Daniel will find me. Put your hands where I can see them," Harris ordered. But Emily didn't listen. In one quick motion, she turned and ran to the window, pulling it open. Cold air rushed into the room. "Stop!" Harris shouted again, moving closer. Sarah screamed, "Emily, don't!" But before anyone could reach her, Emily looked back one last time, her eyes full of pain and fear, and whispered, "Tell Michael I'm sorry." Then she jumped. The sound of breaking glass filled the room, followed by a sickening thud from below. Sarah screamed again, covering her mouth as tears flooded her eyes. Harris rushed to the window, looked down, and then turned away. "She's gone," he said quietly. "She didn't survive the fall." Sarah felt her knees give out. She collapsed into the chair, shaking. Why would she do that? Harris sighed heavily. Maybe she couldn't live with what she'd done. Or maybe she really was running from someone. Hours later, the hospital was quiet again. Emily's body had been taken away. Police officers filled out reports, whispering among themselves. Sarah sat beside Michael, still in shock. When Michael woke later that evening, his voice was weak. "Mom, what happened?" Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to tell him, but she couldn't hide it. "She came here, Michael. Emily, she came to see you. But the police caught her, and she's gone now." Michael's eyes widened in disbelief. "Gone?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She jumped. Right out the window." Michael's body went still. He turned his head away, staring blankly at the wall. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air in the room felt heavy, almost suffocating. Finally, Michael whispered, "She said it wasn't her fault, that Daniel made her do it." Sarah looked at him sharply. "She told me the same thing." Michael swallowed hard. "Then it's true." Sarah frowned. "How do you know?" Michael took a deep breath. "Because I saw Daniel that night. Before they took me." Sarah leaned forward, her heart racing. "You what?" "I was coming home from work," Michael continued slowly. "I parked my car near the store. When I got out, I saw Daniel waiting in the alley. He said Emily wanted to meet me, that she was at the old warehouse near the bridge. I thought something was wrong, so I went with him." He paused, his eyes distant. "When I got there, Emily was crying. She said she didn't want to do it, that Daniel was forcing her. But before I could react, he hit me. After that, everything went black." Sarah felt sick. She covered her mouth in shock. "So she really tried to save you?" "I think so," Michael said quietly. "But it was too late. He must have dragged me to the ditch afterward and left me there." Sarah stood up, her anger rising again, but now it was directed at Daniel. "Then he's still out there," she said. "And he's dangerous." Detective Harris entered the room a few minutes later, holding a folder. His face looked even more serious than before. "We have a new problem," he said. "We found Daniel's car abandoned near the old factory. But he's not inside." Sarah turned toward him. "So he's alive?" "Yes," Harris replied. "And that means he knows Emily's dead." The room went silent. Michael whispered, "He'll come for me next." Harris looked at him firmly. "Not if we find him first. I've already sent out a warrant. Every exit, every border, every town nearby, they're all being checked." But deep down, Sarah knew it wouldn't be that easy. Men like Daniel didn't run away quietly. They planned. They watched. They waited for the right moment to strike. Later that night, when Sarah went home to rest, she couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made her jump. The clock ticked too loud. The shadows on the walls seemed to move. She sat in her living room, clutching a cup of tea that had long gone cold, staring at the window. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, her hands shaking, then answered. Hello? A deep, calm voice spoke. You took everything from me, Sarah. Her heart stopped. Who is this? You know who I am, the voice said. Emily was weak. She couldn't finish what we started. But don't worry. I will. It was Daniel. Sarah froze, her breath shallow. If you come near my son again. Daniel cut her off, his tone chillingly casual. You can't protect him forever. I told Emily that too. She didn't listen either. Then the line went dead. Sarah dropped the phone, her hands trembling violently. She rushed to call Detective Harris, telling him everything. He promised to trace the call and send officers to guard her house immediately. But by the time they arrived, the night was quiet again. No sign of Daniel. The next morning, Sarah went back to the hospital early. Michael looked pale, uneasy. Mom, I had a dream last night, he said softly. I saw Emily, she was standing by the river, crying. She said, he's coming for you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. That wasn't a dream, Michael. That was a warning. He looked confused. What do you mean? Sarah took a deep breath, gripping his hand tightly. Daniel called me last night. Michael's eyes widened in horror. What did he say? Sarah looked toward the window, where the morning sun was just beginning to rise. He said exactly what Emily did before she died, that I can't protect you forever. The silence in the room was thick and heavy. Even the air felt colder. Sarah turned to her son, determination burning in her eyes. He's coming, Michael. And this time, I'll be ready. Outside, the hospital parking lot was empty, but far in the distance, a black car sat quietly behind the trees. Inside it, Daniel watched through binoculars, a faint smirk on his lips. He whispered to himself, round two. The morning sun tried to break through the thick gray clouds, but the world still felt cold and heavy. Sarah walked down the hospital corridor with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Her eyes were red from sleepless nights, her heart tight with worry. Every time she blinked, she could still hear Daniel's voice echoing in her head, you can't protect him forever. She stopped outside Michael's room, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. He was awake, sitting up against the pillows, reading the newspaper that Detective Harris had brought him. His face looked pale but calmer than before. Good morning, Mom, he said softly, trying to smile. Sarah smiled back, but her voice trembled slightly. Morning, my love. How are you feeling? A little better, he replied. But my mind keeps going back to Emily and Daniel. Sarah sat beside him, her hand resting on his. Don't think about them now. You're safe here. He looked at her carefully. You're not telling me everything. I can see it in your eyes. She hesitated, then sighed. Daniel called me last night. Michael froze. What? He said he's coming for you, she whispered. Michael's hand tightened around hers. Then I can't stay here. If he finds me, he'll hurt more people. You, the nurses. Sarah shook her head. You're not going anywhere. Detective Harris has increased security. 2 officers are guarding this floor now. Michael sighed and leaned back. I don't want anyone else to get hurt because of me. Sarah looked at her son, this fragile, brave boy who had already been through too much, and felt her heart break all over again. Nothing will happen to you. I promise. But promises were fragile things, and fate had a cruel way of testing them. Later that evening, Detective Harris arrived with updates. His face was serious. We traced the call from last night. It came from a payphone near the river, close to where we found the van. Sarah frowned. So he's still here. He didn't run. No, Harris said grimly. And that worries me. They discussed security plans for the night. 2 guards would be stationed outside Michael's room, another in the parking lot. No one would enter without clearance. Sarah decided to stay again, refusing to leave her son's side. By midnight, the hospital had grown quiet. The sound of the wind outside pressed against the windows, and the hallway lights flickered slightly. Sarah sat in the chair beside Michael's bed, reading an old book but unable to focus on the words. Michael had drifted into a restless sleep. His breathing was shallow but steady. Then, a faint sound. A door opening down the hall. Sarah looked up, her heart skipping a beat. She listened. The sound came again, slow, careful footsteps approaching. She stood up quietly, walking to the door. Through the small glass window, she could see the dim hallway. One of the guards was gone. Only the flickering overhead light remained. "Excuse me?" she called out softly. No answer. She turned to Michael. "Stay quiet," she whispered, then slowly opened the door. The hallway stretched long and empty. The air felt colder, heavier. A strange smell, something metallic, lingered. Then she saw him. At the far end of the hall, near the emergency exit, stood a man in a dark jacket, his face half hidden by shadows. "Daniel," Sarah whispered. He smiled faintly. "You've been expecting me." Sarah's pulse raced. "You won't touch my son." "Not again." Daniel took a step closer, his voice calm, almost polite. "You don't have to make this harder, Sarah. He's already marked. You should have stayed out of this." She glared at him. "You used Emily. You destroyed her. You made her do this." Daniel's expression didn't change. Emily was weak. She thought love could save her. "I told her it wouldn't." Sarah's anger boiled. "You made her believe she had no choice." He took another step forward. "We all have choices. Even you. You could walk away now, and no one else would get hurt." Sarah's voice shook. "Never." Suddenly, Daniel's calmness broke. His voice rose, sharp and angry. "Then you'll regret it." He rushed forward, but before he could get close, a loud voice shouted, "Stop right there." Detective Harris appeared from behind the corner, gun drawn, followed by 2 officers. Daniel froze. For a second, everything was still. Then Daniel smirked. "Too slow, detective." He turned and ran toward the emergency exit. The officers chased after him, shouting. Sarah hurried back into the room and locked the door behind her. Michael woke up, startled. "What's happening?" "It's Daniel," she said breathlessly. "The police are after him." They could hear footsteps and shouting echoing through the corridor. Then, suddenly, a gunshot. Sarah's heart stopped. A few seconds later, Harris's voice came over the hospital intercom. "All clear." Suspect escaped through the stairwell. "Lock down the building." Sarah sat down, trembling. Daniel had escaped, again. By morning, the hospital was surrounded by police cars. Reporters gathered outside, trying to catch a glimpse of the story. Harris came to speak with Sarah once more. "He's dangerous," Harris said. "And now that Emily's dead, he has nothing left to lose." Sarah stared at him, her voice steady but cold. "Then he'll come for Michael again." Harris nodded. "Yes. But maybe we can use that to our advantage." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "We can move Michael to a safe house," Harris explained. "Somewhere isolated, with controlled access. Daniel will come looking, and we'll be waiting." Sarah hesitated. "You want to use my son as bait?" Harris shook his head. "As protection." The only way to stop Daniel is to make him reveal himself. After hours of discussion, Sarah reluctantly agreed. The plan was risky, but they had no choice. Daniel wouldn't stop until one of them was dead. That night, they transferred Michael to a safe house outside the city, an old countryside cabin owned by the police department. There were officers stationed all around, hidden among the trees. Sarah stayed inside with her son, while Harris monitored the cameras from a van nearby. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. The ticking of the clock on the wall sounded like a heartbeat. Michael sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, while Sarah made tea in the small kitchen. "Mom," Michael said softly, "I keep thinking about Emily." "Do you think she was really sorry?" Sarah paused. "Maybe. I think a part of her was. But it doesn't change what she did." He nodded slowly. "I wish I could have saved her before all this happened." Sarah sighed. "Some people don't want to be saved, son. They just want to drag others down with them." Outside, the wind howled through the trees. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Harris's voice came through the radio. "Everything's calm so far. Stay inside, and keep the doors locked." Hours passed. Midnight came. The forest outside grew darker. Sarah sat by the window, watching the shadows move. Her eyelids grew heavy, but she refused to sleep. Then she saw it. A faint movement among the trees. A flash of metal. She leaned closer, squinting. Someone was out there, moving silently toward the cabin. Her blood ran cold. "Harris," she whispered into the radio, "someone's outside." Static crackled, but no reply came. She tried again. "Harris, do you copy?" Still nothing. She turned to Michael. "Stay here. Don't move." "Mom. Please, just stay hidden," she said firmly, grabbing a flashlight and moving toward the front door. The porch light flickered as she stepped outside. The air was icy, the night too still. She moved slowly, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Daniel," she shouted. "I know you're out there." No answer. Just the sound of leaves rustling. Then, a whisper. "Sarah." She spun around, her heart leaping. The whisper came from behind the cabin. She followed it carefully, her breath visible in the cold air. When she reached the back corner, she stopped dead. In the beam of her flashlight, she saw something hanging on the fence, a photograph. It was a wedding photo of Michael and Emily. And written across it in red ink were the words, "See you soon." Sarah's hands trembled. She looked around, but the woods were silent again. She ran back inside, locking the door, her chest heaving. "He's here, Michael. He's close." Michael stood up, fear in his eyes. "Where's Detective Harris?" Sarah grabbed the radio again. "Harris, please respond." After a long pause, a voice finally came through, but it wasn't Harris. It was Daniel. "Looking for the detective?" "He's busy right now." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What have you done to him?" Daniel laughed softly. "Don't worry, he's not dead. Yet. But you should check the basement, Sarah. I left you something." The line went silent. Sarah stared at the radio, then at her son. "Stay here," she said firmly. "Don't come down until I tell you." "Mom, no." "Promise me," she snapped. Michael nodded reluctantly. Sarah took the flashlight again and walked toward the basement door. Her heart pounded harder with every step. The air smelled of damp earth and rust. When she reached the bottom, she froze. On the floor was a small box, black, with a single red ribbon tied around it. A note was attached. She picked it up with shaking hands and read, "The past isn't buried, Sarah. It's waiting." Her eyes widened. She opened the box slowly. Inside was a photo of her, from years ago, standing outside her old house. And next to it, another picture of Emily as a child. Sarah gasped. The handwriting on the back said, "You should have told him the truth." She dropped the box, her face pale as death. "What truth?" she whispered. "What does he mean?" From upstairs, she suddenly heard Michael scream. "Mom! He's here!" Sarah's heart stopped. She ran up the stairs, flashlight shaking in her hand, and when she reached the top, the front door was wide open. The wind blew hard, scattering papers across the floor. Michael was gone. And in his place, on the bed, was another note. "Round 3 begins now." The cabin door swung open, letting in the cold wind of the night. Sarah stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat as she stared at the empty space where her son had been just minutes ago. Michael was gone. The walls seemed to close in around her, the silence screaming louder than any sound. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the radio. "Detective Harris! Do you hear me? Michael's gone. He's gone." No answer. Only static. She tried again, louder this time, her voice breaking. "Harris! Somebody, please!" But there was still nothing, only that horrible, endless static. Her knees weakened. She felt like collapsing, but she forced herself to stay upright. There was no time to panic. Daniel had taken her son. Again. She rushed to the door, her flashlight beam cutting through the dark forest. "Michael," she screamed. "Michael, answer me." Her voice echoed through the trees, then faded. No reply. Sarah's mind raced. She had to think like Daniel, cold, deliberate, cruel. He wouldn't take Michael far, not yet. He wanted her to follow. He wanted her afraid. And he wanted her to remember. Her eyes flicked back to the black box she had found in the basement. The photos. The note. "You should have told him the truth." The truth. She fell to her knees, tears welling in her eyes. For years she had buried something deep, a secret she had sworn never to tell. Something from long before Michael's birth. Something that could destroy everything. But Daniel knew. He knew who she really was. Her shaking hands reached for the photos again. The one of Emily as a little girl, about 6 years old, standing near a house that looked painfully familiar. A small cottage with a red door. Sarah's eyes widened. She knew that place. It was her old neighborhood, from nearly 25 years ago. "No," she whispered, her chest tightening. "That can't be." But deep down, she knew it was true. Before she could think further, a faint sound broke the silence, the crunch of footsteps outside. She grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer and hid behind the wall. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. The doorknob turned slowly. The door creaked open. For a second, she braced herself to see Daniel, but it wasn't him. It was Detective Harris. He looked disheveled, his face bruised, his jacket torn. "Sarah," he rasped. "Are you okay?" Sarah ran to him. "Where were you?" "He took Michael." "I know," Harris said, catching his breath. "He knocked me out, left me in the van. When I woke up, the others were unconscious." "He's playing a game, Sarah." Sarah grabbed his arm. "Then we have to find him. Now." Harris nodded, pulling out a GPS device. "We tracked the van's movements before it disappeared. He's heading toward the river, the same place where we found him the first time." "The river?" Sarah whispered. "Why there?" "Maybe to finish what he started," Harris said grimly. "Come on." They got into the detective's car and sped through the dark forest roads. The headlights cut through the mist, revealing trees that looked like tall, silent witnesses to the nightmare unfolding. Sarah gripped the seat tightly, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. As they drove, memories began to flash through her mind, pieces of a past she had locked away. A man's voice. A crying child. A promise broken. Harris glanced at her. "You're quiet. What are you thinking?" She hesitated. Then, softly, she said, "I think Daniel knows something about me. Something from years ago." Harris frowned. "What do you mean?" Sarah looked down, her voice trembling. "Before I met my husband, I lived in a small town near the coast. I was young, reckless. I met a man there. He wasn't good for me. Controlling. Manipulative. I left him after he hurt me." Harris's eyes narrowed. "Was his name Daniel?" She shook her head. "No. His name was David." But her voice broke. "He had a brother." Harris's expression hardened. "Daniel." Sarah nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. "I didn't know he had a family. I just wanted to forget that part of my life. But a few years later, after I left, I got a letter from someone named Clara, David's ex-wife. She said she had a daughter. Her name was Emily." Harris stared at her, realization dawning. "Wait. Emily? Your son's wife?" Sarah's lips trembled. "Yes. Emily. That's the little girl in the photo. I didn't know at first, I swear. I didn't know Michael had married her." For a long moment, there was silence. Only the hum of the car filled the space. Harris spoke carefully. "So Daniel's brother hurt you, and Emily was his daughter. That means—" Sarah covered her face with her hands. "Emily was my ex-lover's child." Her body shook with guilt. "I never told anyone. I thought it was in the past. But Daniel found out. He blames me for everything. For his brother's death, for Emily's pain, for the whole curse chain." Harris gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Then this isn't just revenge. It's personal." Sarah nodded, her tears falling freely. "He wants to destroy me by taking my son, by making me suffer the way his family did." The car screeched as they turned onto the old Riverside Road. Ahead, they saw faint tire marks leading into the woods. Harris parked and grabbed his flashlight and gun. "Stay behind me," he ordered. They followed the trail through the trees. The river's sound grew louder, rushing, relentless. The air smelled of damp earth and fear. Then Sarah saw it. A faint light in the distance, the flickering of a small fire near the riverbank. "Michael," she cried, running ahead. "Sarah, wait!" Harris shouted, but she didn't stop. She burst into the clearing, and froze. Michael was tied to a chair near the fire, his mouth covered with tape. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Michael," she screamed, rushing forward. But before she could reach him, a shadow moved behind her. "Going somewhere, Sarah?" Daniel stepped out of the darkness, holding a knife. His face was calm, almost serene. "You finally came." Harris appeared behind Sarah, aiming his gun. "Drop the weapon, Daniel." Daniel chuckled. "You're too predictable, detective." He held up a small remote. "One wrong move, and the whole place goes up in flames. Gasoline's a beautiful thing." Sarah froze. "Please, Daniel. You don't need to do this." "Oh, I think I do," he said coldly. "You ruined my family. My brother loved you, and you left him broken. Emily grew up believing her mother hated her because of you. And now, your son, your precious boy, fell in love with the daughter of the man you destroyed. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. I never meant to hurt anyone. Daniel's voice rose, full of fury. You always hurt someone. You just pretend not to see it. Harris took a cautious step forward. Daniel, listen to me. You can still walk away from this. Daniel laughed darkly. Walk away? No. Tonight, it ends. He turned to Sarah, his eyes burning. You took my brother. You took my niece. So now I'll take your son. Before he could move, Sarah lunged forward, screaming, and no. She knocked the knife from his hand. Harris rushed in, tackling Daniel to the ground. The two men fought fiercely, rolling toward the edge of the riverbank. The gun went off, once, twice, echoing through the forest. Sarah ran to Michael, tearing off the tape and ropes. Are you okay? Michael coughed, gasping. Mom, look out! She turned, just as Daniel grabbed Harris's gun. He aimed it at Sarah. Goodbye, Sarah. Before he could pull the trigger, Michael threw himself in front of her. The shot rang out. No! Sarah screamed as her son fell into her arms, blood staining his shirt. Daniel staggered backward, his expression blank, and then, he fell. Harris had fired. Daniel's body rolled down the embankment into the river below, disappearing into the dark current. Sarah cradled her son, sobbing uncontrollably. Stay with me, Michael. Please. Harris knelt beside her, checking his pulse. He's alive, barely. We need to move now. Sirens sounded in the distance. The flashing lights grew closer as paramedics rushed in. They lifted Michael onto a stretcher, blood still seeping from his wound. As they carried him away, Sarah turned to the river. The water flowed silently, swallowing the last trace of Daniel. But she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. She looked down, and saw something glinting near the edge of the water. A silver locket. She picked it up, opening it slowly. Inside was a photo of Emily as a little girl, and next to her, another child. A boy. On the back were the words, "Family isn't over, Sarah." It never was. Her blood ran cold. The boy in the picture had the same eyes as Daniel. And the same scar as Michael. She stared at the photo, her mind spinning. No, it can't be. But deep down, she knew the terrible truth she had refused to see. Her son Michael wasn't just Emily's husband. He was Daniel's nephew. And maybe, just maybe, something even darker. The night was almost over when Sarah found herself standing alone beside the hospital window. The white lights of the emergency room flickered through the glass, and her reflection looked pale, tired, and broken. The doctors were still working on Michael. They had been inside that room for hours. Every minute felt like a year. She pressed her hand against the glass, whispering softly, "Please, God, don't take him from me." Detective Harris walked up quietly behind her. His jacket was still damp from the rain, his eyes full of exhaustion. He made it through the worst of it, he said. The bullet missed his heart. They're trying to stabilize him now. Sarah turned toward him, tears rolling down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for saving him. Harris nodded, but his face stayed serious. Sarah, I need to ask you something. You found something by the river, didn't you? Sarah hesitated. Her hand went to her pocket, where the silver locket rested. Yes. This. She handed it to him slowly. Harris opened it, looking at the photo inside. Emily and a boy. Did you recognize him? Sarah looked down. At first, I didn't want to. But then I saw the scar. It's the same one Michael has. A small mark above his eyebrow. Harris frowned. You think Daniel knew that? She nodded weakly. He must have. He wanted me to see it, to make me understand what I had done. Harris studied her carefully. Then tell me, Sarah. What is it that you've been hiding all this time? Her voice trembled as she began to speak. Before Michael was born, I lost a baby. I was young, scared, and the father was not someone good. His name was David, Daniel's brother. He was controlling, violent. I left him when I found out I was pregnant, but soon after, I had an accident. The doctors told me the baby didn't make it. Harris listened silently, his eyes never leaving her face. But years later, Sarah continued, I started getting strange letters. Anonymous ones. They said, you left him behind. You don't deserve to be a mother. I thought it was Daniel trying to scare me, but I ignored it. Then I met my husband, the man who became Michael's father. We started a new life. I thought the past was gone. Her voice broke. But now, after everything that happened, I can't stop thinking, what if my baby didn't die? What if Daniel took him? Raised him to hate me? Harris's jaw tightened. You think Michael? Sarah shook her head quickly, tears spilling. No. I think Daniel made me believe something that wasn't true. Maybe he switched records. Maybe he found a way to make me think I lost my child, but he didn't. And maybe that's why he said family isn't over. The detective looked troubled. If that's true, then everything that's happened, the attack, the revenge, Emily's lies, all of it was part of his plan to make you see the truth. Sarah's knees weakened. The truth? She whispered. What truth could justify all this pain? Before Harris could answer, the doctor came out of the room. His expression was calm but tired. Mrs. Walker? Yes, she said, rushing forward. He's stable now. But he's weak. He asked for you. Sarah's heart leapt. She followed the doctor down the hall and into Michael's room. The machines beeped softly, the smell of disinfectant thick in the air. Michael lay there, pale and fragile, but his eyes opened slowly when she came closer. Mom, his voice was weak, barely a whisper. She took his hand, holding it tightly. I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe now. He looked at her with tired eyes. It was him, wasn't it? Daniel? She nodded gently. Yes. But he's gone now. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I wasn't afraid. I was confused. He kept telling me things. About you. About me. Sarah's breath caught. What things? Michael swallowed hard. He said I wasn't who I thought I was. Sarah's hands trembled. What do you mean? He said, Michael's eyes moved toward the locket on her chest. He said that you were my mother, but not my real one. That you took me from them. Her world stopped. No, she whispered. That's not true, Michael. You're my son. You always have been. Michael's eyes were full of pain. Then why did he have the same scar as me, Mom? Why did he have pictures of me when I was a baby? Sarah froze. She couldn't answer. Because deep down, she didn't know anymore. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, I don't know, Michael. I don't know what's true anymore. Michael's hand squeezed hers weakly. Mom. I don't care who I am. You raised me. You loved me. That's what matters. Sarah nodded through her tears. Yes. That's what matters. He smiled faintly. Then promise me something. Don't let the past control you anymore. Please. She leaned forward and kissed his forehead. I promise. Outside the window, the first light of dawn began to rise. The long night was finally ending. Harris stepped quietly into the room, holding a small envelope. "Sarah," he said softly, "they found something downstream, near where Daniel fell." She took the envelope hesitantly. Inside was a folded letter, soaked and torn, but still readable. It was Daniel's handwriting. She read aloud, her voice trembling. "You think you can bury what you did, but blood remembers. You may have saved one son, but you lost another. Look at him, Sarah. Look closely. The truth lives in his eyes. And when he knows it too, you'll finally feel what I felt when my brother died because of you." Her heart felt like it stopped. The paper slipped from her fingers. Harris caught it, looking uneasy. "Sarah, we'll check everything. DNA, records, whatever it takes. But for now, just rest. You've been through enough." She nodded weakly, unable to speak. As the sun climbed higher, Michael drifted back into sleep. The steady beep of the monitor filled the room. Sarah sat beside him, brushing his hair gently with her fingers. In that moment, she didn't care about the secrets, or the pain, or the past. All she wanted was for her son, whoever he truly was, to live. But as she looked down at him, the light from the window caught something on his wrist. A faint tattoo, a small, faded letter D. Her eyes widened. She had never seen it before. She whispered to herself, "D, for Daniel?" A chill ran through her. Outside, the world was bright and peaceful again. But inside her heart, the darkness still whispered, quiet, patient, waiting. And as she looked at Michael, she realized that some truths never die. They just wait to be found. If you enjoyed this story and want to know how secrets from the past can still change the future, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, what do you think really happened between Sarah, Daniel, and Michael? Your opinions always mean a lot.